Well, greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Karl's Spirits. Glad to have you with me this evening. And tonight we're looking at TX Texas Straight Bourbon Whiskey. That's TX Straight Bourbon Whiskey. I've also heard it said, or pronounced Tex. I like to go with just the good old TX. TX Straight Bourbon Whiskey. This is kind of a unique drink. And it was formed by two guys who, unbeknownst to each other, were both looking into making a career move. So back in 2010, Leonard Firestone and Troy Robertson, they had known each other for a little bit because their children were in the same play group. So they had a play date, they had been talking, things like that. But both were looking to make a career move, and they hadn't really discussed that with each other. They were just acquaintances at this point. And Robertson went to visit Garrison Brothers, one of the big Texas distilleries. And while he was there looking over their operation, he was really thinking a lot about getting into the bourbon world. Garrison mentioned that there was another guy coming in that wanted to make a career move as well. They both were from the Fort Worth area. And so Garrison told Robertson about Firestone. And Robertson's like, I know this guy. And so he went home, gave him a call. The two men and their wives got together. They talked about their deep love of bourbon and what they wanted to do with it. And they decided to go into their own distilling business. So the short story is Firestone and Robertson Distilling Company was born and became what they believe the first craft bourbon distillery in North Texas. They purchased a pre-Prohibition era abandoned warehouse that had been reclaimed. They fixed it up, and that became their headquarters. They later expanded into an abandoned golf course for storage and things like that. They first released TX blended whiskey with whiskey they had sourced from other distillers. And it wasn't too long after that they finally released their own TX bourbon. And so that kind of became their trend. They have since released a TX straight barrel proof and two cask finished bourbons using sherry and a tawny port. Then in 2019, the French beverage giant Pernod Ricard came calling. And you all know the story how this works. Very simply, they made Robertson and Firestone an offer they couldn't refuse. And so they sold the brand, although they remain the heads of they remain the head of the distillery. And they're still listed on the bottle. So, what's all about TX bourbon here? First of all, there's no mash bill stated. I really like the transparency where they give you that mash bill, but TX didn't. But what they do mention, and this is their company notes, that they use Texas yellow dent corn, they use Texas soft red winter wheat, and they use Texas distiller's malt, as well as Texas spring water. So you're kind of seeing the trend here. They're really wanting to make a pure Texan bourbon using only Texas ingredients. And I can really respect that. In addition, they even went a step further and they created their own proprietary strain of yeast. And believe it or not, that yeast strain comes from the Texas pecan tree they call the Brazos. So not only do we have Texas corn, Texas wheat, Texas malt, Texas water, but we have a Texas pecan yeast in this as well. It's also aged in Texas, so we all know how hot Texas can be. So we had a lot of expansion in those barrels to really get some nice color and hopefully some nice flavor. Age, again, not listed, but since it is listed as a straight bourbon, we know that it is at least 2 years old. That's the law. The website, as I looked at it, does claim that their bourbons are aged over 4 years. But after that, it doesn't really specify. And it is bottled at what I consider a nice, easy drinking 90 proof. So, first of all, just a remark here. Yes, it's a synthetic cork, okay? But this is a heavy wood with a metal ring around it. Real nice and heavy. It really feels good in the hand. Not that I really look at the aesthetic of a bottle too much, but that's kind of cool. This is also leather that's been wrapped, and I guess that's stenciled on there. But it's an attractive package. Pour a little bit here. And in the glass, it's a nice dark copper color. It has some really nice thick legs. They are very, very thick, and they cling really well. So on the nose, first thing is there's a lot going on here. I mean, wow. The very first thing I get is it's a big sweetness note. And I really think that's a caramelized brown sugar. Really pops right out of the glass. And then the second is a real earthy smell. And it reminds me of nuts and leather. Now, the nut smell, is that suggestive to me because I know that the yeast strain used a pecan nut? I don't know, but I'm going with nuts because it's a real earthy smell. And I get the sense of like pecan shells, if you will. There's also a little bit of a light floral here. And I'm not quite sure what that floral happens to be. I'm not a big floral scented bourbon guy. I'm not big on the florals, but this is really well crafted. I really enjoy the nose. I just love that caramelized brown sugar, that leather. Really, really is well done. Moving on to taste. It has a medium mouthfeel, and it has a lot of heat to it, or some heat to it. I don't want to say a lot, but it has good heat. Let's put it that way. But there's also the flavor there too, which I'm kind of shocked about. Some people go with the heat and they kind of lose those flavors. This has heat, but it also allows the flavors to really come in too. First thing I get is vanilla and tobacco. And then there's some good leather thrown in for great measure there. The heat comes from a black peppery spice that I get toward the end. Really coats the tongue, that black pepper spice. But up front is that leather and that vanilla and that tobacco. The finish is medium. It's not what I would call long lasting, but it does linger for 10 or so seconds here. It's all cigar tobacco, not smoked, cigar tobacco. It's oak. There's a lot of oak acidity here too, along with that black pepper. However, I really think that pepper and oak really dominate. The leather is there at the front and then dissipates out pretty quick on the finish. So I've been kind of impressed with TX bourbon. I ran into it at a tasting maybe a year or so ago. I happened to be at another tasting where I got to really visit with a bottle for a while, and then I wound up with a bottle as well. And I really think that this is a solid pour that deserves a little respect. I also am fairly confident in saying that the price is good. It's a $40 bottle-ish. And it's available locally, which I really think is a great attractive feature. And I really think this is a great addition to your bourbon shelf. It's something different, let's put it that way. I'm a big fan of the nose. The nose is really all there for me. The taste is good, but the finish for me leaves just a little bit to be desired. I'm not a big fan of that acidic oak note. I like oak, but I don't like the acidic oak, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But I really think this is a solid bourbon. I've had definitely worse, definitely better, but this is a great, promising product from Firestone and Robertson TX bourbon distillers. So what am I going to go with? I'm going to go with 3.5 Karl stars. That's 3.5. Kind of not quite in the middle. It's a little above average, but it really lacks on the finish, in my opinion. I think it's kind of a one-trick pony on the finish, but I love the nose. I think the nose is outstanding. TX Straight Bourbon Whiskey, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 66. I hope you enjoyed. Remember, this is my take. Yours may be different, and that's okay. And as always, I want you to stay safe, peace, and happy pours.